All right, so this is going to be the last PowerPoint for this current unit, Early Republic Part 1. So the last thing we talked about were the rise of political parties and also how Washington steps down from being president with this farewell address. Now, this is going to lead to John Adams becoming president. So John Adams was Washington's vice president, so he was fairly well liked because he was associated with Washington. Now, John Adams, spoiler, he only winds up serving one term and doesn't end his presidency, being very well liked. So an overview, here are the 4 things you need to know about John Adams for your test. We have the XYZ affair, Alien and Sedition Acts, the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, and foreign policy with France. Now, I'm going to explain all 4 of those in depth, but those, just when you go to review, those are the 4 things you need to know. Okay, so starting with the XYZ affair. Now, the historical context, remember, we like to look at what's happening beyond what's going around us, but what is going on around the world. So the French Revolution is still happening, and throughout this time, we've remained neutral. If you remember, Washington's proclamation of neutrality stated that we would not get involved with foreign affairs except for trade. So we have to, up to this point, remain neutral. Now, remember how we had John Jay, and he negotiated a treaty with Britain because Britain was taking up, they were basically taking cargo from American ships trading with France and then making American soldiers become part of the British Navy, and that was the whole impressment. And then to end that, we created John Jay's Treaty, which promoted trade with Britain. Now, France is going to have a reaction to that as well, because now they're not going to be very happy that we are trading with Britain. So it's kind of interesting because Washington wanted us to stay out of foreign affairs and only get involved with trade. But even being involved with trade is going to have political consequences. And we're going to see that over time in U.S. history, especially when we get to like World War I and World War II in 11th grade. So the French have a reaction to Jay's Treaty. They thought that the U.S. was helping Britain, so they then seized or took American ships that carried cargo to Britain. Now, this is going to upset the Americans and Adams' administration. So what he does is he doesn't react and want to declare war right away, but he sends diplomats or representatives to Paris to resolve this dispute. Now, the French refused to meet with him. What you have to know is, the world did not respect John Adams like they did Washington, and so they refused to meet with him. Instead, the French send 3 agents, and they demanded a bribe and a loan for France from the United States. Now, Adams prepares Congress for war, and when he's doing this, he used the letters XYZ in place of the 3 French agent names. So that's where we get the XYZ affair and the origin of that term. Now we have the Alien and Sedition Acts. So the public becomes angry at foreign attempts to influence their government, and they become suspicious of aliens, which are residents who are not citizens. Okay, so the Americans, like I said, become suspicious of aliens who are residents who are not citizens. Now, what you have to know is the term aliens. They're basically those that are legal immigrants, but so don't have citizenship. Now, this is a term that we've used in history. This is not something we use today. That would be politically incorrect, so please do not go around using that term. So this is something we just use in history during this time. So the Federalists passed the Alien and Sedition Acts because basically they're going to become suspicious of anyone who was not American, not anyone who wasn't born there, anyone, especially if they're French. And so they passed legislation to protect that. So we have the Alien and Sedition Acts, which are 4 main parts, but these are the 2 things you need to know. Part of the Alien Acts were laws that lengthened the requirements for immigrants to become citizens. So basically it made the process to become a citizen longer and a little more difficult. And it could also deport immigrants for speaking against the government at any point. And then with the Sedition Acts, it made speaking or writing printed materials against the government illegal. And this deals with all citizens as well. So it doesn't have to be necessarily immigrants. Now, the big issue with this is a lot of people are going to say that it violates the First Amendment because remember, we established the Bill of Rights. And the reason we did so was because we were afraid of giving the government too much power. We didn't want to have a tyranny leading us. So we included things that would protect our individual rights. And one of those was the First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech and freedom of press. And so these two things go against freedom of speech, which would be speaking, and then writing printed materials. So anything in the newspapers, that would be the freedom of press. So this is going to go against our First Amendment. So this is going to cause an issue. And so the two main leaders, just the Democratic Republicans, overall, they viewed the Alien and Sedition Acts as Federalist tyranny. So they viewed them as an overreach of government, and they did not like it at all. This is basically their biggest fear that they had with government, with giving and switching from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, and how we were so afraid to give the government too much power. This is that acted out, and this is the government having too much power and overreach and taking away kind of our fundamental rights. So Jefferson and Madison convinced two southern states to pass resolutions where a state could decide for themselves to follow a law passed by the federal government. So any law that's passed by the federal government, it's basically the states that would then get to decide whether or not they would want to follow that. Now that would strengthen states' rights and then lessen federal rights, because it takes away power from the federal government and gives it to the state government. It also stated that a state could nullify, which means to get rid of, a law it deemed harmful. So that is going to give a lot of power to the states, and we're going to kind of see how that turns out next unit. But that is what happened in reaction to the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, this is the end of Adams' presidency. Now, Adams resisted going to war with France, and instead, like I stated, he sent diplomats to France, and he strengthened the Navy. And in 1800, France agrees to a treaty to stop their attacks on U.S. ships. So we have an agreement, we negotiated, we compromised. So we got out of it and avoided going to war and having a conflict. But this agreement was very unpopular with Americans, and it hurt Adams his chance for re-election. And Hamilton and his supporters didn't like the treaty, which caused a split within the Federalist Party. What a split in a Federalist Party, what that is talking about is when you have a political party and you have one, so the Federalists, it splits it in two. So they're still Federalists, but they're going to be very split. An example of that would be the most recent election, so Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton is a Democrat, and the Democrats were split because you had a lot of supporters that supported Bernie Sanders and then didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. So because of that, she lost votes and then eventually lost to Donald Trump. But the Democratic Party basically had a split. So that is what happened in the election of 1800 as well, because you have the Democrat Republicans running against the Federalists, and the Federalist leader, John Adams, doesn't have all the support because they are split. So this will improve the Democratic Republican chances to winning the presidency in the election of 1800, which we will learn about next week. And if you are interested in listening to a Hamilton song, this would be the song The Adams Administration. Okay, so it goes over his administration, but please listen to the clean version because the explicit version is inappropriate. So please make sure you listen to the clean version. Anyways, that is a overview of Adams' presidency, and that is going to conclude our Early Republic unit for Part 1. Part 2, we'll start talking about the election of 1800, which is a really fun election, and talk about like what happened with everything we talked about with France and eventually leading to war. So it's going to get a little interesting, a little controversial. So anyways, if you have any questions, please come to tutorials.